so many other points that, the points Antonio Guterres was making was like, where does the US go to from here, and kind of what is the validity of the United Nations? And the rumors also, as said by the Russian state media, we don't have this from the White House, but that President Putin has also been invited to join this board of peace, of which Donald Trump is the chairman. And again, and as he said in that interview, whether it has any commitment remaining at all to international law, because President Trump just seems to be smashing those norms and having very little regard for how a sort of rules-based world order has operated since World War II. And we have the evidence for that, right, don't we, in terms of Venezuela? So many questions about the legality of what happened there.
Clearly, I think, it would have been quite a thing at this point in the arc of this story, wherever it goes, to sort of say explicitly, tell you what, the king's not coming at this point, not least because of that strategy from the Prime Minister to try and dial things down and take some of the heat out of this, rather than being seen to sort of pour kerosene on the bonfire. So it's clearly an option. These visits by the monarch are a political.
Yeah, and just as we're recording this episode, Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary, has started updating MPs in the House of Commons about the government's position, and we will keep an eye on that as we wrap up our conversation here, in case she says anything substantially different from what the Prime Minister said earlier in the day, although I suspect she will probably be reading a very similar script. Chris, the second thing that emerged in the questions to the PM this morning was this idea of the King's visit to the US, because of course it's the 250th anniversary of the day.
But I mean, let's just cast our minds back to Donald Trump's first term in the White House, when he first floated the idea of wanting to buy Greenland, and behind closed doors there was so much sniggering across Europe. What a ridiculous idea. But after his military intervention in Venezuela, nobody is laughing anymore. And if you think about the international shock at Venezuela, this...
But, we've had this extraordinary exchange as well over the Nobel Peace Prize, which is just a kind of remarkable thing to see these letters going between prime ministers and presidents about, as President Trump said to the Norwegian president, considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace.
And so it's an island that's sort of a sleeping giant of an icy island that is now being, thrust into this geopolitical storm and doesn't want it. Really resentful against Donald Trump, really resentful against us journalists who are there. I think, people are scared. They're scared for their families. They're scared for their future. They're petrified about this idea that Donald Trump might take